But looking back at that, what I'd like you guys to do is spend a few moments just thinking about that transformational learning. That ultimately we're facilitators that work for an organization which is trying to create social change, and our role in that is enabling those transformational learning experiences, because that's what starts that whole theory of change. So all this work goes into getting them in front of us, whether it's on Zoom or in a room, and getting us together, and then we facilitate, we make it easier for them to learn, and hopefully they get to this third level, have that transformational learning experience, and that's what makes the difference, and that's what starts the whole rest of the process going on. So thank you very much for that, David. That's grand, and to hear some of your thoughts about the sort of the potential broader impact of it, building back differently. So we're just about to have a short break. So what I'd like to do is I'm going to make the break a little bit longer than it was going to be. I'm going to make it about 20 minutes. But in those 20 minutes, I'd like to leave a bunch of breakout rooms open, and have you guys come together in them. You can either stay in the main room and chat in a large group, but I'm thinking it's pretty difficult to chat with this many people all together. So let's use some of those breakout rooms, and also use the chance to have a nip away and get a cup of tea or use the loo or whatever. And if we get back together at 11:15 and have spent some time in the breakout rooms saying, okay, in the last year, what has your experience been of managing to still create those transformational learning experiences in spite of the situation? And how have learners been responding? Have they been in some ways more engaged and more open to change and difference because of the circumstances, or have they been holding back and saying, no, I want to try and keep things the same, I don't want to change, I just need to manage and keep it going? What's been your experience of it? So for David, it's been this in many ways an opportunity, and to see a way of building back differently. What's your experience been as a facilitator trying to create transformational learning experiences, and how have you experienced the learners' response to that? So dive away, have a few some chats about that, and we'll get back together at 11:15 in this group. And I'm guessing by now Diana's created a whole load of breakout rooms that folks can dive into. And don't be embarrassed if you're sat in a breakout room with one other person, you want to go to another one, just say, hey, I'm heading off to the next one. Let's not be so polite that we all end up sat in the same breakout room. Okie doke. Off you go. A couple of the breakout rooms, and from what I can tell, people were having a bit of a blether about meaningful things, which is grand. And hopefully, folks, a lot of people were eating cake and drinking tea and coffee too, so that's good news too. Kat's catching up on her calories, good on her. So I'm going to give you guys half an hour, and we're going to open up more breakout rooms. This time they're going to be themed. They're going to be themed around areas of work. So one might say just enterprise, one might say schools, one might say international, and various other categories, which are all lifted from a diagram that we'll share with you. And the diagram is simply saying, oh, this is what's happened in the last year. It's there as a memory prompt, because what I've done in the past is said to people, so remembering what you delivered in the last year, and my response to that is, I can't remember what I delivered yesterday, let alone in the last year. So this is like, there's a table of stuff that's been delivered, and you can have a wee look at that. And I think, Dion, I haven't asked you to do this, but is it possible to put that into the chat so people can see it wherever they go?
Yeah, I can do that.
Yeah. That's grand. So Don, we'll just wait until that appears in the chat. You can have a look at it here if you like, but there's 3 pages of it. But you can see it's just enterprise, COVID response, clients and partners, stuff that's continuing, and contracts. And further down, there's schools and international as well. Oh, thank you very much. Beautifully done. That's grand. So it's going to appear in the chat for you, purely as a memory prompt to remember what's going on. But what I would like is, I'd like someone to kind of take charge of each of the breakout rooms. So I'd like someone to say, well, I'll go into the COVID response. I'll host the COVID response breakout room. And someone else to say, I'll host the education one. I'll host. And hosting it doesn't mean you have to stay in it. It means you stay in it until you can pass the host to someone else. It's just so that there's someone there in some way taking note or noticing the conversation. So we're going to spend 20 minutes going around these breakout rooms and go into the one that's relevant to you. You know, don't feel like you have to go and find out what went on in COVID response if you weren't involved in it at all or whatever. Just go into the ones that are relevant to you. And I'd like you just to share some of your experiences of delivering those programs. And then when we come back together, I'm looking for a story from each. A story which is either surprisingly effective experience, or an absolute bonkers situation that you found yourself in. And I'm hoping we don't get all bonkers situations, but I think it would. So I'm hoping to sort of come back with some hopeful stories of saying, actually, this worked really well. It was remarkable, the experience this learner had as a result of this program, this facilitation. Or, oh my God, I just have to, I need to share that. So for instance, one of mine is, whilst delivering a program to a bunch of folks in Egypt on Zoom, I couldn't get half of them to turn their cameras on. They were just completely blank cameras, completely muted. And I was about 15, 20 minutes into the program and I still couldn't get them to. And then it became clear it was because they were driving. So half the group was driving whilst attending the program. So right. So that was a bit of a like bonkers moment for me. And there's been multiple ones. Any of the schools facilitators would no doubt come up with a few bonkers situations there as well. So it might be something like that. Keep the bonkers ones short, the positive ones a little bit longer, a little bit more insightful for us, and hopefully this will help everybody get a flavour of some of the positives that have happened in the last year and some of the challenges that have cropped up as well. Right, have I spoken long enough, Deanne, that the breakout rooms and everything are ready to go?
Yeah, they're ready. Would you like 25 minutes, half an hour? If
you can just pop them on for 25 minutes. But we might come back a little bit sooner than that. So go to the breakout room that suits you. And the first thing to do is just agree who's hosting it, who's going to take a few notes about the conversation, or who's going to capture it in some way, so that when we come back together, someone's got a bit of a higher level of responsibility to say something about what the chat was going on. Okay? Is that too loose, or is that all right? We're responsible enough, aren't we? You know what it's like trying to facilitate this kind of thing. Help me out. Yeah. All righty. Away and enjoy yourselves. Welcome back. Welcome back.
Hi.
So I realized that I was the first person to arrive in the international room. So I might have been being perceived as the host. I'd just like to inform those in the international room that I was never the host, and I'm not going to feedback about it. So Roy and hang on, who else was it? David, of course, and Angela. You guys are going to have to do a bit of quick tap dancing and send each other a couple of private messages to decide who's going to kick off the feedback from things. Is this everybody? Let's think. I'm struggling to keep track. There we go, that's Helen. Emily's on her way, no doubt. So should we do a little, I don't even know if every room had someone in it. So if there was a room that didn't, maybe, I don't know, we'll either ignore it or we'll suddenly have some thoughts about that subject matter. So what should we start with? Anyone keen to kick off before you forget what you were going to say? And then we'll start with your room.
Aye, okay. Well, I'll start off with the COVID response room.
COVID response room, okay.
Myself, James, Kat, Lorna, and then Helen joined us about halfway through. We had examples of bad experiences, like Kat trying to kind of have participants on their phones while driving in a traffic jam, what sounds like, just the difficulty of some of the situations that people are in at the other end of this digital screen.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, we thought one of the good things about doing things on Zoom is the possibility that learners are actually more informal because they're in their safe space in the room while they're participating, and so they may feel less inhibited. And the comedy value of having cats wandering across keyboards and children running in and out kind of adds to the informality. Although I wouldn't suggest they go as far. This is a story I was just about to tell when they closed the room. There was one woman whose son wandered across in the background, just wearing his scanties and his underwear, which was just awful. So the things that we talked about, the sort of bad experiences, there weren't actually that many. James was talking about one thing, I was talking about another thing where things didn't go as expected. But we ended up talking a lot about feedback and facilitators lacking the sort of formal feedback that we've got used to in the academy. And then Lorna saying how difficult sometimes it was to get people to actually put the feedback together. Lauren asked the question, was that an evidence of less commitment from learners? But we thought, no, that was actually outweighed by the learners' need to share and communicate at these difficult times. We thought it was to do with the learning platform, that not everybody logs into that. So they caught short when they come to provide their own feedback. And we cited the example of the Just Enterprise Rebuilding Income Streams program, where the last 10-15 minutes was taken up with filling in the Just Enterprise form online. So they would click a link and actually do it as part of the program. And you would dangle some carrots, you know, to keep people engaged and doing that. And that seemed to work. I'd be interested to know from the Academy staff whether the response rate from the Rebuilding Income Streams for the feedback is a lot higher than some of the other programs. But it's also, you know, our experiences in facilitating Zoom calls is as soon as you finish it, you just want to go off and do something different. You've got to have a break. And so it's quite easy for people to forget that they've got the feedback to do. So I don't know if we did what we were supposed to do, but that's what we did. That's what we talked about.
You reflected on your experience, Sheila, so you were definitely doing what you're supposed to do, which is grand. Any other thoughts, either from folks in that group or anyone else that's been involved with the COVID response situation?
We did talk about the peer response groups and just how the Academy did really well to get those out, and how good it was, and how important we're finding it is in the room for people just to connect. Hence, spending lots of time in breakout rooms. You know, if in doubt, just get them talking to one another, which is often what we used to say, and that remains really valuable to people now that we're in another second, third lockdown, whatever we're in. And so, whilst peer response, it dropped off. Once people got going and got into the stride of lockdown, then people didn't attend. But we felt that time connecting people is still really valuable. We've got to remember how important that is, and that's where so much good stuff happens, just as it always has done, and not to forget that. So don't panic if we're not ramming in the content that we might think we need to get through the prescribed content, because they've got manuals, they've got online stuff, so they can do it. Get people talking to one another, because that's what they're valuing.
Thanks for adding that.
I think that we were kind of we talked around that point, but we didn't make it. Sorry, Sheila.
Yeah, there was a little bit of mention in the international group. We did talk for a moment about the COVID response stuff and recognise that actually the importance of being there. You know, that the Academy didn't disappear. That we were there, and even if the experience of it wasn't perfect or whatever, I think the experience of learners of knowing that the Academy is still there was a fantastic sort of safe haven for them, and also for us a stepping stone for them to engage again. So lots of people had the experience of doing something with the Academy, which was much better than a lot of the other stuff going on out there. You know, I heard a story of another organisation ran an hour-and-a-half session, and they started it by saying, well, let's just hear a little bit from each person here about their role and what they do. And an hour and 20 minutes later, that bit finished. And then there was 10 minutes of the thing. And the guy I was talking to said, I wish I could have just left, but I just didn't feel like I could. So that's what was going on around us while we were providing something a little bit more meaningful, I think. Grand.
Can I just say, we seem to be talking about the COVID response things as something that happened in the past, but actually we're all still in the middle of it.
Are they still going?
No, I think we're all in the middle of COVID. So I think we maybe shouldn't be seeing that as something that was only necessary a year ago. I've just been involved in one here with musicians, and it's as if it's taken this long for some individuals to start trying to compute what's been going on. So we might even have more of that to do from now on. I think we might be open to that.
Yeah.
That's
I think it was one of my thoughts on the rebuilding income streams one, which we ran last year. We possibly need to think about repeating that, because people have processed some of the original thoughts that they had and have taken certain things, and sometimes they've not worked, or sometimes it's led to more radical change. So I wonder whether, it's part of your point, that things are still going on. People are still kind of grappling with a number of stages at which the timescale has just kept shifting. So now we're looking at next year before some sales streams will come back online. So there's a need to maybe think about that again.
That's really interesting. I must admit, I've been guilty of thinking of the COVID response stuff as something that was an immediate response to the first lockdown. But you're absolutely right. There's still many of them still relevant. Yeah. That's fantastic. Any other thoughts around the COVID response ones? We're going to go around each of the groups if there's something to be said about each of them. All right. What was the next group then? Who's up next?
I'll go next for the Just Enterprise group.
Thank you very much.
And I'm sure everybody will chip in.
Can we just have a quick hands up to show how many people have been involved in the Just Enterprise program, just so we can get a little feel of who are the yes. Oh, look at all those people you work with, Louise.
I know.
Okay.
I'm so lucky.
So are we. Sorry, so are we.
Too slow, Jay. Too slow. It was quite an interesting conversation, because when first lockdown happened in March, we had several multi-day programs which were halfway through. So we had a whole lot of learners who had experienced the Academy learning style in the room and loved it, and they had varying reactions when we told them that it was all going online. The most extreme of which was Sal's group of senior leaders, who just had no interest in taking their learning online at all, and just felt that, in a couple of months when it passed, they would start up again. And this conversation went on, and it was quite hard, because as a programme officer, I don't want to let my learners down, and Sal didn't either. But as time rolled on, with all of the programmes and Bobby's aspiring leaders, it became apparent that it wasn't the Academy trying to push the programme to an end. It was the pandemic dictating what we could do, and we picked it up and delivered the second half of all the programmes online. And they were all a success. The feedback we got from all of them was really, really positive, which was so heartwarming at the end of last year. And we've started a whole new range, and it's obviously different because these learners have signed up for this. But Sal was talking, and Sal, you can maybe pick me up a bit on this. She was just talking a bit about the model that the Academy uses with the comfort zone, the learning zone, and the panic zone, and how differently you had to work with that, with the group that we're halfway through, and also with the group now. There's a lot more panic zone in that, and how much harder you have to work. Maybe you can pick that up, Sal.
I think you've said it really well, Louise. No, I'm just saying, I think often it's a case of drawing learners from the panic zone into a safe space. So you're drawing them inwards, whereas normally you're trying to take them out of their comfort zone and push and challenge. And what that means, what brave and bold learning means at the moment, is actually somehow people coming in out of this crisis state they're in, and a panic zone, and creating a space. In fact, Anne and Mary and Sheila and I were talking about this just before the coffee break, about the importance of creating a reflective space for people, to actually a structured place to think, and that being actually incredibly insignificant at the moment. So I'm just jumping out to those three people as well and taking it off into another conversation. I don't know whether Sheila, Anne or Mary, you want to add anything in on that?
Yeah, I think we did reflect on the fact that people do need the space in the programmes to reflect in. We were chatting in the Just Enterprise group. I guess it does depend on the type of programme, but I've had a lot of really positive feedback from learners where they've just been given the space where we stopped for 5 minutes, take a breather, reflect, capture your thoughts, think about this, and then talk about it. And a lot of people have really, because, you know, for many people, their lives are at home, working from home, hectic, and they found that really helpful. And I think we slightly moved from the beginning of the whole process to feeling that we needed to make sure that our learning was as interactive as it might have been face to face, and trying to make sure that we did a lot of interactive stuff. And I think we kind of shifted a bit from that. I certainly did. And I think that the learning benefited from creating more reflection space than I might normally have had on a day. And I think that's just a reflection of the space people are in just now.
Excellent, thank you, Anne. That's wonderful. It's interesting here, Sally, to sort of brave and bold facilitation. I'm going to segue across to the international guys, because a part of the conversation there referred to courage and trust. So it's interesting we say let's go away and talk about our facilitation experience, and words like brave, bold, courage come up. So I'm going to punt you, I think, over to Anne. Unless, is there anything else to add about the Just Enterprise programs, people's experience of that? So I should throw it open to everyone first.
I think the only thing sorry, Jay, that we recognised was quite a lot of us in the Just Enterprise programme, our programme stopped, or, you know, we were facilitating in March and then there was just a complete hiatus. And yeah, it was recognising that it's quite different, where you've got a group where you have to negotiate and find what works for them to finish off their programme in the way that's most helpful for them. And I think all three, certainly myself and Bobby and Sally, all had 3 different groups whose responses were all different to what they wanted and what they needed when, and that kind of thing. So that was challenging, mainly for Louise, I think. Whereas no, we don't have that this time round with Just Enterprise. There's a different set of expectations, if you like. Yeah,
I guess because it's already set. It's going to happen online. So are you up for that, yay or nay? You're not already in the situation. And I also think around when lockdown first happened and everything first moved online, that's got to be some of the most challenging time, because think of all those moments where you have to say, oh no, you're muted, or here's how you use this function, or here how you use that. People are immeasurably more comfortable online if they've been engaging since the start, and if they haven't, they're kind of a long way behind. So there's a bit of a question, I think, for us as to, there's this barrier, there's this hurdle we expect learners to jump before they can engage with us right now, which is, you know, being able to function on virtually. We need to be a bit cognizant of that. But I think that time when you guys were handling a group of people that were accustomed to doing it one way and then saying to them, actually, I'm afraid we're going to have to change this, whilst also having to change it yourselves, whilst also having to rewrite programs and create new mechanisms for it to work online when no one really knew quite how it was going to work. I think, you know, a round of applause for you for managing it at all, and to get the results that Louise is talking about. I think we should be giving ourselves a big pat on the back there. The responsive response is what's enabled that. Yeah, that's great. So a segue over to the international team then, about Anne, tell us, can you remember saying the words courage and trust?
I can, but that's unfair. I've just sent a message to Roy and David saying I arrived late.
All right, okay, sorry. Right. Well, if something else has gone on in the background, then you guys sort it. We're going to the over to the international room now, to our correspondent. I don't know who it is.
Well, I can start and then you can carry on, Roy.
Okay. Yeah, you go.
We talked about confidence and just diving in and just having to have such confidence in their own skills in everything in the last few months. I can't remember what the other words I used, Jay, but we then kind of segued along to talking about our time management, because a lot of us have been very, very busy. And, you know, the reality, all of a sudden, one day, when you look back and you've done 5 different programs, or you've worked with 5 different organizations, not even the academy stuff, and you realize that in one day you've done what would normally take you a week in previous times. And what the implications of that are, and one for the international team very much, is the fact that we don't have that movement from the Isle of Skye to Pakistan or wherever, and all the time all the knowledge that you gain and all these essential ingredients that you gain in that travel to deliver your program, we're missing out on. And how do we pick up on all the cultural stuff that you would normally really prep in advance if you're actually going there in physical times? You'd be buying up books, you'd be reading about the culture. And we're not doing that anymore. And my warning, perhaps, to the academy was that we need to be very, very careful that we don't become the English language provider, because we're not using interpreters, which you would be if you're in the space. You know, and avoiding that colonial perception that could arise from that.
Yeah,
I think that's the 3 things. Yeah, Roy.
Yeah, thanks, Anne. Yeah, these were 3 important things. There was the cultural differences, and recognizing the cultural differences and coping with that. And that's where the trust came in, because you want to try and use breakout rooms as much as possible. And they can obviously speak their own language and they can get on with it, but you have to trust that process is happening in breakout rooms. And also culturally, a lot of people, the default is you put your camera off. They're there to listen and learn rather than participate and have a camera off. So you have to be really quite directive to ask them to put their videos on and actually ask them to contribute. Also, there's challenges about connectivity and people arriving on time. And they're signing up. A lot of people will sign up but actually don't turn up. So it is a bit more disjointed like that. And also I found that they tend to take, and we did the COVID programs in Pakistan, and we've done some in East Asia, currently doing them now as well, but they are quite condensed. They're even shorter than they were in the UK and over a shorter time span. So while they were self-directed learning elements to these programs, where people were expected to learn and to go onto the learning site and do some reading and so forth, that just didn't happen. So you just had boom, 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 and input from the facilitator, and the learners did not have the time to actually do the self-directed stuff and do the reading and go onto the website and stuff. And also we need to be aware of that the material's culturally sensitive, and there's some of the Emerald Work stuff which isn't, and some of the VUCA stuff wasn't, and we had to kind of change at the very last minute to make sure that references to the American military and the Gulf War were taken out of it. So there's things there to learn as well. But positives about it though was that there's an appetite for this. It's great actually pairing up with some of our international facilitators and co-facilitating programs, which is brilliant. Anything else that we've missed?
Really, very much that people given their time to us, given the vast array of other demands on their time in terms of their own family, their own business or social enterprise situation, the huge number of other interventions that are out there, that they've actually put their trust in us, these guys from the other side of the world, which is superb. And yeah, sometimes in bigger numbers, sometimes in smaller, but they've you know, the fact that they've said, yeah, we really want this stuff is superb.
And the people that we're reaching is fantastic, and the organizations that we're reaching is fantastic, and it's building up this network. So there's a huge amount of positives, but there are, well, we know the restrictions there are with Zoom, and that is perhaps a wee bit more compounded by culture and language and so forth, but we just need to be aware of that and we are just getting better and better as we go along.
Yeah, it does seem that I find it really interesting looking at the international situation and then saying, does that conclusion apply to a more Scotland context? And things like being aware of the culture, things like the time spent traveling to a venue being thinking time, all those things definitely, you know, definitely still apply. I think the going online is quite often sort of shone a light and put a magnifying glass on processes that were happening in the room, but which we weren't able to see. So someone being a bit reticent to speak in the room is someone sitting a bit quietly, but they're still there. Whereas someone reticent to speak on Zoom, you know they are because their camera's off and they're muted. You know, so it suddenly all becomes much more evident, and the tendency when you try and put too much stuff in to become didactic becomes even more sort of noticeable on Zoom. So I think there's opportunities to learn all sorts of things which will benefit us in the room as well. Yeah, so it's kind of fascinating to say, how does that apply in the other context? Yes, Sally.
I was just thinking about that word opportunity on the international scale. Some of you might know I worked for Oxfam for years. And one of the really interesting projects we did was to bring people from what was then called the South, you know, but here to support communities here, because it was felt that our communities here in terms of community development were very sectoral, you know, far too focused on issues like housing, or, you know, rather than having a sort of broad analysis. So bringing people from the third world, the South, whatever you want to call it, over here to facilitate conversations in communities here in Britain, and particularly in poor communities. It was a fascinating piece of work, but it reminds me, it's kind of got echoes now, is that these opportunities to bring partners, facilitators from other parts of the world to facilitate conversations here, with all the cultural issues that brings with it, language barriers, all these kinds of things, but kind of really appreciating it's not about, you know, it is not a kind of, to pick up on Anne's kind of theme, have to be careful one doesn't get in some kind of colonial mindset of us thinking we have something to take, and it not be about actually communities working together to share common issues around the world. And we have as much to learn from each other, usually more, than we have to give. And I think the online platform really offers a major opportunity that I can now see to do that, because it takes away a lot of the travel costs. And I appreciate all the things you're saying about travel and how that, you know, I get that, I understand that, but it's also a pain in the arse sitting around in like crappy airports for days on end, you know, and it means you can't do it if you've got family and all this stuff. So I think there's another side to it, as long as one's in a mindset of equalities and opportunity. And I think there's some really exciting stuff out there. So I'm really interested to watch what's going on the international program.
Yeah, I absolutely share that. The getting rid of the travel thing personally has been really beneficial for me, in that I'm able to engage with Malaysia without getting massively jet lagged and being away from a family for 2 weeks or whatever. The other thing that is a nice surprise is I've always been really uncomfortable when I arrive in a country. Someone comes and picks you up from the airport, and they've put you up in a hotel and all the rest of it, and you sort of have to get away from this. Here comes the international facilitator. It's amazing how you suddenly become so much better just by getting on a plane for a few hours, but you get received as if you're this sort of blooming dignitary thing, and you have to break away from get all that out the way so that you can engage effectively. When you go in on Zoom, you're just a bloke on a camera, same as everybody else, and all that's gone. It was a much more straightforward kind of engagement, and I think it would be the same the other way around as well. You know, as long as you can get a camera and a signal, it's just John from Mozambique or wherever it may be. You know. So I think there's great opportunities to break some of the hierarchies that exist in terms of that. Yeah, be grand. Okay, what other rooms did we have? Because we need to move on. We spent a lot of time internationally, and I didn't do the hand thing, but I don't think there's that many hands would have gone up for people that deliver internationally. Give us a quick international hand if you've had an opportunity to do. Interesting. Well, there's there's a few more hands than I expect. That's good. It's something which is now increasingly open to all sorts of folks. Okay, another room. Someone name me the room they were in that we'll go to next.
I can go. I was in the client and partnership room, and like we just had Helen and Roy. So I think like a lot of facilitators have worked in like both internationally with education and different things. Mm-hmm. So we don't have much, but feedback was really positive. We talked about the innovation sessions that we did for CLAPA, and Helen was saying that it was an interesting challenge. It was inspired by from a program that was delivered in the room. So this transition from in the room to online was interesting. The only thing to really pay attention to was to the needs of each organization. So there was quite a lot of adaptation to do, like adapt whatever was delivered to whatever was happening in the different organizations. Mm-hmm. We talked with Roy about the innovation sessions as well, but also the peer response groups that were quite spot on, where like people from the same organization were in the room together, and we thought that it was quite positive and fruitful what could happen, the connection that could happen in the room, very useful. Yeah, that's it. I don't know if any facilitator who had worked with clients wants to step in and say anything that would be specific to working with clients during the last month.
Mm-hmm. Now's your moment.
I think to your point, Elsa, about being able to bespoke the programs for the client on the basis of consulting with them, I think is really important. It's still maybe the same award spine that goes through the program, but then actually getting the nuances that really suits them as being a co-creative process I found works for the client.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Fantastic. Thank you very much, Mary and Elsa. And Elsa, did you have some notes to paste into the chat as well? I think you were, rumor has it you took some notes.
I copied the notes, they disappeared, and I can rewrite. Yeah.
Oh no, don't worry, that's okay. I just didn't want to omit them if they were. Okay, so so moving on, what else do we have? What rooms do we have left that were populated? I noticed there were folks in education. Mm-hmm. So would someone from the education room like to say a few things about the experience of the last year facilitating in the world of education?
Emily's just blanking me. So yeah, I there's the nod. Yeah, it's me.
Go on, you.
So couple of best bits for me in the education side. First one revolved around really reflection again, and just the opportunity to give teaching staff a little bit of space and time to reflect on why were they there, what was their purpose in being there, CPD, why this social enterprise thing, and actually the value that teachers seem to put on that opportunity was really encouraging. Shadowing Jay, actually. The opportunity to be alongside Jay, to be in a virtual classroom, and the enthusiasm of a primary school class to see Jay back. I'm thinking, what on earth did you teach them the first time? But actually that engagement with pupils was really encouraging as well. Just to see that you can get enthusiasm virtually from young people and from pupils. Bonkers bit. For me, so far has been the learning live experience with eSchool, and basically we had an opportunity there to share live with goodness knows who at the time. So I found out later on my first session was with 139 pupils, which was really encouraging, having talked to my camera on my own and getting a little bit of reaction from a chat room. That was great. But then sadly, the next session, to find out later on there was 2 members of staff and no pupils, was a bit of a downer, to be honest. So really bonkers contrasts going on there on the education side from my recollections. Emily,
yeah, definitely.
Who else rushed that room after me?
I didn't make it to the room, but I'd share my experience of doing stuff on the education side of things. Is that the randomness with which your connection with your learner occurs is like nothing I've ever experienced before. You know, those times in a room where someone starts drilling in the room next door, or it turns out the room's not quite right, or Zoom functionality is not ideal. It's immense when you get to the point that I was once delivering a session, this was when they were still in school, to 2 classrooms simultaneously, of 25 kids in each classroom, but I wasn't allowed to see the pupils. So the only response I could get from the pupils was what they'd said in the room, which the teacher then chose to put into the chat for me to read in the chat and respond to. And it gets to the point where you feel like you're speaking to them through a hose pipe or something. It's just this tiny little connection. But the positive of it is, in spite of the fact of having to do all sorts of weird and wonderful interactions like that, the feedback we get is, that was fantastic, thank you so much, they got so much out of it. The enthusiasm when you do see them is immense, and to me that points to how potent our offering is in challenging times. It might not be as good as it would have been in the room, but it's really, really valuable to our learners. And I think that it's kind of very evident in the schools context, but I think that's the case right across the board. It's like we can't get quite so much there, but one drip of it is worth a cupful of the usual stuff. I think people have been really appreciating it. So that's my 2 penneth from the school side of things. I can see Emily's poised.
My 2 tuppence worth for the schools things is just the randomness of the technology in schools. You've got no idea what you're dealing with. So you think, we're all okay with Zoom now, but my goodness gracious me, Google Classroom, Teams,
Vimeo,
and the lack of knowledge from the teachers of how to use that technology is astounding. So when you eventually manage to actually get through to the kids, it's great, because that's the main content, and that's what we're all missing. I think in the education team, we're always saying that is the actual content of getting into schools and getting to chat with kids has been really, it's getting difficult. I spent all day yesterday making 6 little videos to go into schools, and it's just not the same.
But you wait until you hear how they're received, Anne, because I made the same 6 videos to send to schools, and I did them in my kitchen thinking, I'll give it my best shot, but you're talking to a camera stuck on a tripod and it's just not the same, and all the rest of it. And then you get the feedback going, oh, it's so good to have that, and the kids loved it, to see someone in the room, and you think, oh, all right, then I guess it was better than expected. Yeah, go on, Sally. Sally's giving me a little spending time in
just
India.
Thinking about digital poverty, it was interesting, the principal from the University of Western England was on the radio yesterday talking about digital poverty there. 40% of students, 40% of higher education students do not have access to laptops.
Yeah, I absolutely agree.
But I mean, I find that really astonishing as someone who has 60,000 computers in various states of repair lying around the house, to think that 40% of our higher education students, and I know from friends that are teachers as well, that they find it very upsetting that some of their students don't have access to the digital technology in order to join in, and data issues. And, it is a huge divide between the haves and the have-nots at the moment.
There is,
and I just say, from a learning point of view, I think we just have to be really conscious of how many people in our society are being excluded, even the ones at university. I mean, 40%. I just found that really, I was shocked. I was shocked at that statistic.
What age is does higher education encapsulate? Do you know?
Well, university. It's the University of Western England. These are university students.
Yeah, they've all got tablets, but they don't have laptops.
Yeah, I think it's 16 plus, so it's also college.
I've
just been informed by my college lecturer once.
The interview. I mean, I'm just saying it is. And a primary teacher yesterday telling me one of her kids was so excited that she'd been given a tablet for Christmas.
Yeah.
But her mum had actually bought her an Amazon Fire, and that doesn't work, you know, with the online school platform. So she thought she was going to be able to participate, and now she can't.
Yeah.
And it's just like, anyway, I just sort of, I just think just need to.
Absolutely, Sally. I think you'd find agreement across the board with that. And also we need to think not beyond the education and think about the relevance academy wide. Is that there's, you know, there used to be barriers to engagement to do with travel. Many of those have disappeared, but then some other barriers to engagement have appeared. You know, in terms of whether you've got the kit and whether you've got the broadband. I mean, I was barely here at the start of today because my broadband's not wonderful. So, you know, and that's the same for all of us. I'm sure Helen must have some amazing bit of kit. Not quite sure how you do that on a boat, but there we are. She's managing it. Yeah. So I think that's something for us to contemplate going forward. Yeah, Sheila, you wanted to say something about it?
Something occurs to me. Has occurred to me about whether we've got the same process going on with learners. I ran a peer support group for organisations in Glasgow, and they were all involved in the front line of food poverty. And actually what really struck me was most of the participants were working class people, you know, just ordinary punters living in their community, inspired to do something about that. But also their level of skill with digital technology was pretty poor, and some of them, well, we've all demonstrated, some of us have not got particularly good internet connections, but I do wonder what proportion of people we're excluding in the academy from joining us because it's all done digitally now, and I don't know the answer to that. I'd be interested to know.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's completely relevant. I also think we're quite unaware of what the learner's experience is. And by that, what I mean is at the moment, we've shown you a bunch of slides during this, and we've shown you a bunch of pictures of this, that, and the other. But I wouldn't mind betting that not everybody has seen all of them, and not everybody has seen all of them clearly, but nobody said anything about it. And if we're not prepared to go, actually, I can't see that. In fact, actually, Sheila, you did. You said that blue is really challenging, or it's all pixelated. But oftentimes people won't. And I think we can get into a bit of a false comfort zone, thinking a bit like when you send an email with 20 bits of information in, you think, well, I've sent the information, so they must have it. Whereas the reality is actually only some of it's got through. I think that's happening for us. It'd be worth us doing some kind of test to see what does it actually look like at the other end. What does it actually sound like? Even if you have got connection. And also on, I keep forgetting at the beginning of this, I was having to use a tablet and a mobile phone quite a lot. And so I got accustomed to what does it appear like on that. And I've kind of forgotten now, because I'm always on my desktop now. It's all set up, ready to go. But I did have someone in a group say, "Oh, hello, John. I didn't realize you were here." And you're thinking, how can you not realize he's here? He's out there on screen. And of course, she was on a mobile phone. John hadn't spoken. So from her experience, he hadn't appeared on her screen yet, because she was only seeing who was. So I think much like we try and understand, it's very important to understand the learner's experience in the room. We're missing a trick with this. We need to be cognizant of that, I think. Anyway, I better step off. I'm starting to sound like a soapbox.
When you do your induction or your tech session, you know, the first session, you know, because people are so more used to being online, I've kind of abbreviated it. And then I got caught out last week because somebody was struggling because they weren't as experienced, and they were on an iPad and they couldn't use the controls. So the reminder to me was, do what we were doing back in the early days, is checking exactly what everybody's viewing it on, and whether they can alter their name or they can see the chat box or whatever it is. Doesn't matter that we've been at it for a year now. There's still problems. That's for me, that's the biggest learning point.
Yeah. Excellent. I'm aware that we're very nearly out of time we're going to finish at 12:30 for lunch, and there's I think there are still rooms to go. So what do we have left? Help me out, guys, if you've got a room to speak about and I've not gone to it yet. Mm-hmm.
Mary and I were in a room together, which said very vaguely contracts. And I was sitting there alone on my own, and Mary came and joined me.
Excellent.
But we actually just talked about coaching, because that actually probably hasn't come up yet.
I guess that's part of the COVID response, possibly, but it's a bit bigger than that. Yeah.
It's bigger than that, and it's an ongoing, something we've been doing on an ongoing basis, really. So Mary's experience, and she can jump in, please. But had been really positive that engaging and connecting with people in an online way, in a coaching format, has worked really well. Hadn't sort of come across any difficulties in any way, really. No bonkers stories, maybe a sort of blur between counselling and coaching. So, and that might have been very representative of that initial response and the offer that we gave. And where we offered maybe 2 short sessions or only 2 sessions, actually that was the sort of counselling element, and actually it needed to be, there needed to be more interaction and more engagement with people. But as far as inclusivity and accessibility, it's really opened up, our coaching offer to people. Yeah, I think that was it. I don't think there's anything else other than Maddie was able to let me know that in that sense, she has been able to coach a vet in Australia. When would you be able to do that?
I don't know. Depends what you do over a weekend. That's grand. Excellent. I'm glad you've got to coach a vet in Australia, Mary. That's wonderful news. Heartening. One of these days we'll find out how that fits into the whole theory of change. I'm sure it does. Great.
I'm just going to add. We were doing one of the longer courses, the tourism program. We felt that there wasn't some of that connectivity that would have been got on the residential program. So David bolted on some coaching sessions for people who had been on that but still wanted to connect with us, and those have been, for those that took them up, have been very well received. So it was a way of adding that to the offer when you're negotiating contracts or whatever, and that seems to work quite well. So people want to follow through on something, but they want, so that's another thing. It seems to me, well, it's just me getting busier or getting asked more, but there seems to be an increase in coaching. I don't know if it's to do with COVID or requirements for one-to-ones. I don't know if I'm right or wrong, or whether it's just because they're just enterprise funding.
Go on, Mary.
What I'm noticing as well is something that I don't know if we're doing stuff about this in the afternoon, but in terms of working with teams or systemic coaching, I think is going to be something for the future, because I'm hearing too many individual managers or leaders of smaller enterprises or charities who seem to be feeling very responsible to sorting all of this through COVID. And actually, I think to get more dispersed leadership and a collaborative leadership model through taking teams through coaching might be the way forward, or even with partners in the system. Something to just take away for, it's all my responsibility. And that's where the counselling side has been coming in, not in terms of doing counselling, but in terms of their potential stressors around feeling over responsible. So I just think just a wee nod to that for going forward. And certainly it's something they're doing out there.
Yeah, that's really useful, because what you've just absolutely relevant what you're saying, and you've also just demonstrated how the day's session is going to sort of pivot. So we've been looking back and we've been saying, okay, so what are the circumstances? We're quite blatantly going around Kolb's learning cycle here, in case you hadn't noticed. So we've been reviewing and reflecting on stuff, including what does that mean for that part of the academy, and can that be applied more broadly? And Mary has just beautifully demonstrated reflecting on the what's been going on for her in a particular area and how she might want to respond to that going forward. And that's what we're going to be looking at in the next after a break, is okay, so this is what's been going on, and how are we going to go, how are we going to move forward from this? And we're going to use the classic sort of what we're going to do a bit more of, what we're going to do a bit less of. And we're also going to look at what can I do as an individual facilitator? What can I do to improve my practice? What can what can others do to enhance the chances of these transformational learning experiences? And what can the academy do? And I've got some documents so that we can literally populate that response. We're going to have just after lunch, we're also going to have a moment where we're going to look at some of the myths around virtual facilitation and ask really to generate more of a dialogue about some of the challenges which exist within it. So I'm going to do a little activity like that, which for those of you who know the jute bag will look quite similar. The process of it will be quite similar to the jute bag. So that's what this afternoon has in store for us after some lunch. I want to make sure, Sheila, you were nearly saying something and I sort of talked over you. Is there something you wanted to add?
It was just to add, one of the things I think has been really essential is the board development and board support programs that we've been running. And I know Mary's going to get involved in that, but going forward, you know, it's not enough to focus on just the chief executives, because the boards are in danger of getting left behind.
Excellent. Okay.
You know, because everybody's focused on their staff's on furlough, it's them carrying the can. And if they don't have a very good relationship with their board, then where do they turn to apart from their peers?
Yeah.
But in fact, they should be really being supported by their boards, and I think boards are struggling.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so both Sheila and Mary are both expressing sort of they're already ahead of the game, going right. What are we going to do with this? What's coming next? I'd love to see your learning styles. Are they both pragmatic learners? Who knows? But anyway, so that's what everybody's going to be doing after lunch. There'll be a brief moment of reflection on some of the challenges, and then after, and then we'll start looking at the future.